You know, and the funny thing about mining though too is that a lot of people have all the technology is available to everyone. How you utilize it is different, and everybody has their own methods. Investors can have ideas and they can voice them, but you know, we have a method that works for us, and we can incorporate some things into it. But basically, that's the way we do it.
So we're up here with Dean Smith and Rich
Alberthal,
and then your other partner is
Rich Schaefer.
Rich Schaefer. So today we're talking about their mine, and for anybody that's interested in lending money to them and getting a return on that, that's really good. And so I'm up here doing an interview, and so now you said that Schaefer has the most experience, and how much experience does he have? You said
He's got about 25 years of
25
actual
years.
experience, right? And then, and he's done a variety of different methods of extraction. He is one that knows more about the smelting or firing aspects than we do. And so between all of us with the different aggregates and agriculture backgrounds, I mean, we've got the machinery and everything down pat. I've been doing this for a little over 5, right? And I started working under Rich. Everything that I've learned from him. Boomer got me started, but that's another story.
and I met Rich and Dean a couple of years ago, and I'd been processing ore, screening, crushing, milling, all that kind of stuff for the last 20 years. But the concept of catching gold was new to me. I switched careers and quickly discovered how hard it was to actually catch gold. You know, I thought I had it made.
yeah.
Being in the industry I was. Okay, so I learned within the first month that I had to concentrate on catching fine gold. That'll pay for the operation. Large gold is easy, anybody can do it. But here in Arizona, most of the gold is small.
Especially in the hard rock applications, right?
Right.
And then every ore is different, completely different. Whether we're talking about hard rock material or even placer material for that matter. It depends on if the base soil is loamy or clay or if it's just gravel. You know, that's why we have 2 different sets of trommel types. We have one that we would use in standard sand and gravel with no dirt, which is a sluice style catch. And then we have the reverse helix trommel that we use when we're in the heavier, from loam all the way up to clay materials, because it's just, it has a chance to agitate more and get crushed more to make that separation that we need.
Now let's talk about because you have let's talk about a placer mine, and explain what a placer mine is.
Okay, well, basically placer claims or placer mining, and you can tell me if you don't agree, is the surface alluvial material, which is what we call an overburden. So, and then a lode claim or a hard rock claim is the solid ground that's underneath that.
Right.
So we can go out and establish placer claims everywhere, but what you're doing is digging the soft earth, and we target primarily areas of water runoff, or if you look up in the mountain ranges and you see the cuts where the weakest part of the mountain is eroded, those are places where they have a tendency to concentrate the gold that's free flowing in the soil. So, but there's no increased milling needs or crushing needs, because that gold is already free of the mineral deposit it was in to begin with.
And then you said that's the part that you had to learn was how to extract that, and why is that so important?
Well, catching the fine gold, it tends to, if you've got a little bit of clay in your material, it tends to float off with the water. So there's methods that we can use to get around that and still capture that fine gold. Whereas the heavier pieces, they settle down into the sluice easy.
Yeah.
Anybody can do that, but
Right.
here in Arizona, there's not a lot of big gold. It's primarily fine gold.
Yeah, like 200 micron.
Yeah. So in that fine gold though, there's good profit, right?
Sure.
Absolutely.
It's all worth the
to be
same
able to
amount.
catch it.
Right.
You know, we've spent close to $250,000 of our own money to learn how to do this, incorporating many different methods.
Right.
I had the opportunity to spend some time at a couple of the well-known mines around here, working there and learning their methods and incorporate,
And you can say them, vulture mine.
well, and incorporate methods from other mine operators
Uh-huh.
that work the best for us.
Right. And then we were talking about, you know, how much gold you get out per ton and stuff, but, you know, basically it comes down to about an ounce an hour, right?
It does at the volume that we pick to run, right? I mean, your standard, you'll hear a lot of ranges in materials for placer claims, but your standard placer claim is maybe a half a gram to a gram per ton.
Right.
So the only way to make up the volume is to run a lot of high tonnage, right? So that's why our trommels are set up to run anywhere between 30 and 50 tons an hour, depending on the composition of the material.
Now, you know, I'm kind of like a lot of people, and I think, oh my gosh, you know, a ton is, you know, going to be this great big, you know, pile of, you know, dirt
Oh,
or
yeah,
something.
no.
But in reality, a ton is what, like a scoop of,
Right, off of standard front end loader or what have you.
yeah.
About a 1 yard bucket would be about a ton and a half. So a ton of material. First little pile down there at the end of the border is about they're dumped in 1 ton increments.
Yeah.
Right, but so you're talking what, maybe 4
Well-
by 4 by
Well, a yard is 3
3
foot
by
by
3 by
3 foot
9.
by 3 foot.
Yeah.
So it's,
but that's a ton. and a
that's
half.
about a ton and a half.
Yeah.
So
So
2
it's
by 2
really
by
not
2.
that big of
No,
Yeah.
volume.
Yeah, it's like 1 scoop.
right,
So you're doing 30 to 50 scoops
an hour.
an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So it sounds like a lot, but actually in reality, because of the weight, it's not that much, and that's why you're able to get an ounce of gold an hour.
Yes.
So your plan is,
In
you're gonna take the plaster, and start with that, and then you're gonna move into hard rock. And you have hard rock that's available outside of the, you don't have to dig it up, it's just laying on the ground, right? On the other
Yes,
location?
we have some waste rock piles that are available us and some mine tails
Uh-huh.
on historical mines here in the area.
Mhm.
And then there's any number of existing tail piles that we don't have contracts with, but they're available or on BLM land or third-party contracts. There's any number of things that we could get into.
Now, the big caveat to this is that when you go after those tailings, you're actually cleaning the contaminants that are in that, right?
Yes. One of our associates, Scott Bramwell, from one of the organizations that we've done some toll processing for, we had never thought about it, but he pitched it one day as an idea. He says, you know, when we go out and we clean up these sulfide tailing piles, we're extracting all the lead, all the sulfur, all the arsenic, and everything that's naturally occurring in the mineral base that's just sitting out on top of the ground.
Right.
With the rain and the
Yeah.
things are leaching into the soil over year after year after year. But
And
when you
contaminating
process
the
it,
water runoff.
exactly.
Yeah.
But when we process it,
Uh-huh.
all those things are in the same density or weight range, or if they are dissolved in the water, we collect them in our return water programs because water's precious out here. So we recycle water no matter what we run.
Right.
We will have X amount of fresh water introduced, but then through what do we want to call them? What do we
Well, I
call
don't
them?
know,
Ponds. Settling ponds.
Settling.
Through our settling pond system, 2 or 3 stages, then we'll recapture that water and reintroduce it into the system. So 2/3 of the water we'll consume will be reused, and then only a third, usually about right,
Yeah.
about a third new on a day's operation. So it saves us some money. Point being that in that concentrate that we make, the gravity concentrate, all of those other minerals are associated with lead, arsenic, even iron for that matter, right? Because the tell me the fancy name for
what?
for the black for the
For the black sand? Hematite?
here you go, hematite.
Which nobody else probably knows.
Right.
Right.
So we'll collect that, and then when we send it off for either refining or further processing, the method of extraction that is used downstream in the refining process, they're set up to, they will strip off the lead and then they'll use it for either car batteries or other industry needs, solder, what have you. The arsenic, the if they're processing sulfides, they'll either roast them or crush them and leach them, and then that will release the sulfur, but then the sulfur will be collected in either method, and they'll make sulfuric acid out of it, which will be reused in their processes, but we removed it from the ground.
Right.
It was properly handled in the industry, which is regulated by the government, and then those products will never be redistributed out on the ground again.
Right.
Whereas back in the old days when they were leaching with cyanide or mercury or whatever, the miners back in the 1800s, early 1900s, they didn't know
Right.
that it was a problem, and whatever they washed down the creek and killed the lizards or whatever, and so, they didn't know, so there it is. But we don't use those methods anymore.
Right. So that's an important thing, that not only are you, you're extracting the precious metals, but you're also cleaning the environment, which is, everybody wants to be able to do that. And that's kind of exciting to think that you have a way of making money and at the same time cleaning up some problems that are out there,
Right.
which I think is just really cool.
And we can even dispose of excess aggregate material, right?
Yes. I would like to add to that just a little bit, though. We have dry processes that we've been looking at, and they don't require any water. So out here in the desert, that's really a great concept, not
Right.
having any water, and we can still clean up the environment using no water. The disadvantage to that is it's a little higher dollar cost to get started.
True.
It's between $1 and $2 million per 10 tons that you want to run, and 10 tons really is not a lucrative rate to process at. It's a good starting point.
No, for us, it's more of a module.
Right.
We build them in 10 ton per hour modules, and then depending on the size of the project, you would just add the number of modules necessary.
So if you're doing 10 ton, you want to get up to around 30 or 50, somewhere in there.
Yeah, between 40 and 50 would be ideal.
Okay.
But then you make choices too, like we could stop at 30, because modules are expensive, and then we just run more hours a day. The hard rock operations, placer not so much, although we could, but it's not always helpful, because the placer mining has a lot of cleanup time that has to be done,
Right.
like you see on the gold shows on TV.
Yeah.
Once you run it, you still have to go back and re-clean it, so it almost takes an equal amount of time. Whereas hard rock, whatever concentrate we would make, especially in an electrostatic,
Right.
the dry environment, then that would just be packaged and run, and that's almost all machine work. The placer still involves quite a bit of hand labor or people labor.
Which they don't show on TV.
Yeah, which they don't show on TV. A lot
They
of
show
machine-
you the end product, you get big pans of gold.
Yeah.
But they don't show you how long it takes to actually get that big pan of gold.
Right, and
Right.
how many people it took to do it. Yeah.
So then you get into the hard rock where you're crushing, but in the hard rock it takes more time, but you have more, you get more gold. It has a higher concentrate.
Yes, usually the total values are higher in the hard rock portion. But, like we were talking about earlier, if we run a ton of placer, we're just gonna extract the concentrate, which may be maybe say 5 to 10 pounds out of a ton of material. Well, when we take that same ton of material in hard rock, we have to crush and mill 100% of the rock that was in there and reduce it to a fine powder, for lack of a better term. We target about 200 mesh.
Right, and if you don't know what a 200 mesh is, that's 200 holes in a 1-inch square.
Right,
So the material has to fit through that.
so finer than flour, cooking flour.
Wow.
Right.
So you're taking that rock, turning it into
Yeah.
cooking flour,
Cooking flour.
and then getting the gold out of it.
Yes.
So it's more expensive, and the hard rock also is more consistent. So you pretty much know how much you're gonna get per ton every day. But with placer, you don't necessarily know that.
No, your grades are gonna fluctuate in the ground, but
Yeah.
Mother Nature didn't lay the minerals down at the same rate for everybody, so.
Yeah.
That's right.
But in the hard rock, then instead of getting a half to a gram per ton, you're going to get how much? An ounce or a gram to 2 grams? Then twice as much?
No, a really good hard rock claim would be in the range of a half an ounce
Half an ounce
per ton.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So quite a bit more.
But it costs more to get it.
But it
Yeah.
costs more to get it, right? Actually, they end up being about equal in value. if you figure in the costs and everything.
Right.
Although the production rate on the hard rock will be higher.
Mhm.
But,
Does it take as much manpower with the hard rock?
more.
More.
Takes
Okay.
more to do it than the placer.
Mhm.
Right. But there's a lot of limitations on placer mining, right? Which is why we've been having these discussions about private or patented ground.
Right.
that we have. In this case, one of our hard rock interests has a 43101, which is just a measured and indicated value that's been certified through any number of processes, drilling, fire assays, and what have you, certified by geologists. And then in the placer claims, the only way that we can make those truly work economically is if we can also find patented ground, because it doesn't limit us to the volume of material that we can mine. What limits us is as we dig to certain depths and we're monitoring what the actual gold production is per level, we know we will choose when to stop. But if it was, say, a BLM claim, if we started out on our standard 20-acre BLM claim, and we have a couple of those that we like, you're limited to 1,000 tons of exploration, and then you have to go back and file a mining plan, is that what they call it?
Yes, which can take up to 2 years.
2 years to approve, and then we have to start paying bonds, and we have reclamation responsibilities either way. However, but if you stall the project, your costs continue. So
Right.
so when we use private land, we can use more of it, I guess, is basically what I'm saying.
You're not going to be stalled in your
Right.
process.
Right, nobody's dictating to us what we can run, what we can't, how we have to do it.
Right.
Right. And then that also gives you the advantage of bringing material in onto that private land.
Yes, once you own the real estate, we can then transfer some of these other claims that we don't own or third-party contracts. And yes, we could bring it to that patented land and process it on site.
And then it cleans it up as well.
Right.
Cleans up that site.
Yes.
Because you're removing the contaminants with the material.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
So that's awesome.
And then from a safety standpoint, I mean, we're still regulated
Yeah.
by MSHA,
Yeah.
the state mine inspector, federal mine inspector. Working on patented ground doesn't shortcut anyone. You just have a little more freedom.
Yeah. So then you go from hard rock, then you get into underground.
Still hard rock, just underground material,
Yeah.
right? Actual.
And then you bring in somebody and they do the actual, how wide the tunnels are gonna be and how they're gonna go, and they like map the whole thing out then.
They do all the digging, they bring the material out to the surface,
Oh,
and
wow.
we're right back where we started.
Oh, okay, so they actually go in and they dig it out and
Yes.
they pull it out.
Drill, blast, and muck, right, is what they'll call it. And it'll be based on the drill logs or whatever geological surveys are chosen. They will access the mountain at a certain point to get to something they're interested in, but everything is to take advantage of gravity or what have you. The actual shaft size or the adit size is purely dictated by the size of the equipment they actually want to muck the material out with, right? Where back in the olden days, the guy with a hammer and a chisel and a pickaxe, he didn't make any bigger hole than he needed to just to chase the vein, right? But so anyway,
So
standard
then you have more cost, but then you have higher
higher grade, yeah,
Higher
and they
grade.
call that high grading.
grade.
High grading, right?
Uh-huh.
Which is exactly what we did on the one. We looked at mining we'll just call it the Yarnell, because we already know what it is, but the Yarnell was set up about in 2008 to go into an open pit heap leach, cyanide heap leach, and there was a lot of opposition to it. Project never got started. Same owner still has it. We asked him to consider, let's just go back in and high grade. We'll leave the mountain standing, so it won't affect the community as much. It'll
Right.
lower our cost of reclamation, and then you can just concentrate on the high grade. So we have the fault proper in there runs about a half an ounce on average to the ton, and it's enormous. And then the actual high grade quartz veins that most people think about when they're mining, they're running anywhere from, probably 5 gram up to 1.5 ounces. But we know what those structures are when they drill them, core drill them. the entire mountain was drilled off to 300 feet, well then they use any number of technological programs for mining. They map the individual drill holes, and then they can give them a grade assignment, and then you end up with a three-dimensional picture of exactly what you're looking for, where it's at, and then that's what they
Yeah,
make the
so
decision on.
you don't really have the guesswork,
No.
because you're taking the guesswork out of it, so,
Right.
you know, they'll have geological studies where they can kind of figure out what's underground, but then you're actually drilling down into that, and you
Yes.
can actually pull those core samples out, and then you know exactly
Exactly.
what's underneath there, and that's what the 43-101 is.
Yes, and this particular project up in Yarnell has already had $8 million spent on that process.
Right,
So we know exactly what we have, it's just a matter of,
and it's only drilled to 300 feet. You know?
right.
Yeah,
So-
and that geologic, whatever you call
Structure,
that,
yeah.
is actually
Flooded
going
fault,
down.
yeah,
Yeah, so
Right.
that's pretty
It has what they
exciting.
call it a down dip.
Down dip.
Down dip, yeah. With that particular, the fault runs at about a 45-degree angle, but then all of your underground stratification or mixing that was happened when the mountains are heaved and the
Yeah.
volcanic activity, you know, they're only chasing certain sections that have these values in them.
Right,
But then as that thing flows down, they call it a down dip.
yeah. Well, that's pretty exciting. You know, it's kind of, for me, it's exciting to see your steps and how your plans are working. You're starting with the plaster, then you're going to hard rock, and then you might bring more product in, but at the same time, you get at a point, and then you're gonna go after the high grain or
High grade.
high
Yes.
grade. And so that's, you know, just really exciting. And then I think the thing is, fun for me is you look at all these things and it makes sense because you have your base is like $800 an ounce. We're up at, that's how you figure it, that you gotta be above that, and we're at $1,700 an ounce for gold, so there's quite a gap in there. So if
Yes.
there's some fluctuation in gold prices, you're still gonna be in business.
Right.
Correct.
And when we started in this business, gold was what, about 240?
Yeah.
240, 250. We just did it for recreation. We didn't get serious till it got expensive.
Everything we do after we come up with what we believe the value is,
Uh-huh,
we underestimate it.
yeah,
Oh, you have to.
You know, we want to account for all the down dips.
right,
Better to be a hero than a zero.
That's right. Machine breakdowns, all that, you know, it all has to be accounted for.
Yeah, we normally
Even though we structure that into our operation,
budgets.
you still just don't know.
right, yeah, you don't know how long you're gonna be,
Yeah. Plus, there's plenty of people in this industry that make a lot of false claims.
yeah,
You know, it's actually a tough industry to make a living in because you are overwhelmed with people that are exploiting, for lack of a better term. the
There's a
industry.
lot of people that want to make money and think they can become millionaires in gold mining,
mhm,
and they could,
mhm,
but you got to work.
yeah,
And
And
the
you
three
can't
of
be
us,
you can't be undercapitalized either.
right? The three of us, we want to work.
mhm,
Well, that is probably our main benefit, though.
Yes.
Right, is that we run our own operations while we have other staff. We are in the field, and we also learn the lesson of diversification. Even though we have different projects starting and then we'll transfer, we're still going to run different projects, and then we'll still do toll processing too, where we take in outside ores and just grind them and run them through the test plant to identify what their value is and what it would take to mine it, you know,
and you're doing that right now,
and we do that all the time.
yeah,
And then we can let people know how many tons an hour they need to process at to
Yeah.
be profitable.
Which is basically what it is, right?
yeah,
I mean, we could go out in the driveway
Yeah.
down here at Joe Parker's house, and we would find gold,
mhm,
but it's not in enough quantity to sustain an operation.
right,
But we do find you can make money on low grade materials. What the industry says is low grade materials, if there is enough of a stockpile and you can run it at a reasonable pace. I mean, it's just like a grocery store, you know, making small profit but selling huge volumes.
yeah. But that gives you the advantage because you're actually in the process of continually testing all the time.
Right.
different locations and what they're,
Select.
what it takes to be profitable, and you're doing that's your everyday business.
Yes.
It does
that's-
give us an advantage. Also, it helps us find different products because, truth be known, 99% of the people that bring us products can't afford to get into a production.
No.
Right.
So if we can help do that, that gives us more opportunity.
Yeah. The other benefit is that there, for every type of rock, it reacts different on the table. It grinds different. It crushes different. So we have to we adapt our methods to each ore type. So when we see ores that are high in metallics or high in quartz or high in sulfides or whatever, all those materials in general are run similarly, but each one has its own specific set that it goes through. So the more different types we run, the wider our options are to run it.
And again, that gives you the advantage because you're continually working on different material.
And types, yes.
And so you're gaining that knowledge with all these different material.
We've learned over time that we can't decide how to process an ore has to tell us what to do.
Yep.
And you gotta listen to what the ore says.
Yeah. Well, I think that's good for this interview. I hope the people watching are going to listen to the whole thing because it's really fascinating to me, and there's a lot of good knowledge, especially what you've shared here at the end. I think is just really important for people to see. And if anybody's interested in putting some money behind what you're doing, I think that they'll understand you guys know what you're doing, and that's the important thing. And not only are you working in just one particular area with one particular type of rock or material, but you're constantly changing that all the time and learning how to get the most out of that. So that's really good.
Another batch of stuff, and a lot of people want to have turnkey operations where they do everything,
Right.
but the costs and the knowledge, especially when you get into some of the leaching, the chemical strippings, the acid, you're dealing with some of these things. I mean, you just price yourself out of it. Mining business is a lot like the restaurant business, right? Most of them fail because they're undercapitalized. If it costs us $100 to do something and we've got 75, it's not enough.
Right.
Yeah.
No matter how you slice it, it's not enough.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we spent all of our time learning, and then we bought the key pieces of equipment that we needed to do the bulk of the work, which gives us some flexibility. We can rent some, what we purchase, what we need, and then, so we know exactly what it's gonna cost us to run.
Yeah.
So
Well, I just think the way you guys are doing it and you have the experience of testing all this stuff just gives you such an advantage over the person that, is just trying to do it themselves.
Yep.
Because you're, like you said, I think that's the perfect illustration that the ore tells you how to extract it.
Oh yeah, there's no other way.
Yeah.
There's no other way.
And we're benefiting right now there's been a boom in technology with enhanced gravity. So whereas the old methods of sluice, which is probably one G-force, then you've got bump tables that are 2 G-forces. We scaled up to Neff bowls, which are 8.
Yeah, 8 to 10.
Right, and then you saw the centrifuge, right? We showed you a
Yeah.
picture of the centrifuge we had
Yeah.
set up.
That's-
That one is 3,000.
300.
Oh, 300, I'm sorry. 300 Gs, right? So when we talk about catching the finer gold, now we have that enhanced gravity options, whereas before we were just flooding water or whatever we could grab on the table. But like Rick said, size of the material, if you run too much water, you just push it off,
Right.
right? The big gold is so heavy, it'll sit anywhere you leave it. But there's 80% of it is fine gold, right? And 20% of it is the larger gold, right?
Yeah, that's really. So that's it for today, and if you have any questions, get a hold of us. They go to the website there, and you'll have our information for contact, our phone number, and the email address, and we'll get back to you promptly. Alrighty?
Perfect.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.